So a little while ago, the end of 2024, our church decided to take part in the Santa Claus parade. And it's not that we're super excited about Santa, it's that we wanted to engage our community where they're at. So we knew there'd be a lot of people who may not know about our church, that we could use this opportunity to say, hey, our church is part of your community. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to do something on the float that would be something biblical. And so the decision was made that we would do Noah's Ark. And we had the funny idea that I would dress up in a dinosaur costume and run behind the ark as if I'd missed the ark, right? Kind of like, hey, we have a sense of humor. It was a 3-kilometer walk, which is not really that bad. I mean, I play basketball, and I know I'm not in great shape, but I play basketball enough to know I can handle 3 kilometers. The problem was, as soon as I got into the costume, it was like a cold night and steamy on the inside, and so I just fogged up immediately. There's like a little window that you can see through. It fogged up like instantly. I couldn't see anything where I was going. And so I was just kind of like, I'd clean it off and take a few steps, and clean it off, take a few steps, and I'm following along behind and it was about 10-15 minutes before we actually got going too. But I found it really difficult. And I'm thinking, am I really in this bad a shape? Like we're not that far into it, and I'm like, I can't breathe. And I realized what was happening. I found out later the little vent that allows air to come in iced up. And so for I'd say a kilometer and a half, I was basically breathing into a plastic bag. And it was getting to the point where I was like, okay, this is serious. Like at first I was like trying to calm myself down. I'm like, okay, am I hyperventilating here? Am I really I'm like, breathe slowly. And I was like, that's not it. Like I'm like, literally, I'm out of breath here. And I'm thinking to myself, what happens if you die? You go to heaven and they said, you died in a T-Rex costume. Like, they look at you like, really? I gave you life and this is what you did with it, And so I'm starting to get scared, and I'm like, I got to stop. I got to get out of here. And I think I'm a little bigger than the average person that this was designed for, so I had to try to unzip it. I'm wearing gloves, right? And I'm like, I can't get the zipper undone, and meanwhile I'm getting worse and worse. I can't breathe. And I finally get the thing undone, and I have to hunch over like this. So I'm literally T-Rexing it, And I'm like, catching my breath, and people are running over. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you dying? I'm like, maybe, but I think I'm going to be all right. And for a little while, I'm trying to keep up. It was just a really bad situation. I tried to redo it again, and almost immediately the same thing happened. So I kind of punted on the whole following the parade thing. I felt trapped. I was terrified, and I was not terrified. There was a moment where I was terror, and it wasn't just claustrophobia. It was I might die here. Have you ever felt trapped? Maybe it's a life situation. Maybe it's a dead-end job, an addiction. You don't see a way out, and you would give anything to find the doorway to freedom. What's interesting is that some people see Christianity as a prison with walls made of rules. Some people look at Christianity and they just feel trapped. Some people who are Christians might feel trapped. It's like Jesus and his rules are the 4 walls that keep you from being free. The walls that Jesus puts up to keep us safe, to some people, become a jail that keeps us trapped. But then there's some other people who see Christianity as the opposite. Jesus said that it's for freedom that Christ has set you free, and they really embrace that. They approach Christianity with an anything goes mentality. God is all about grace and forgiveness, so I can just do whatever I want and he will forgive me. So is Christianity about the walls that keep us trapped, or the freedom to live our lives and do whatever we want? Jesus answered that question in John chapter 10. We're doing this series called I Am, which is the 7 metaphorical I am statements in the Gospel of John. He says I am more than this, but 7 times he specifically says I am something metaphorical. And there's a historical significance that goes along with this. We've talked about this throughout the series so far, but for anyone who's missed it, when Jesus says I am, he's actually saying I am divine, I am God. Because if you go back to the Old Testament, when Moses says, who are you? Who can I tell my people has sent me? God responded by saying, I am. And so when Jesus says, I am, using those words, he's more than just making a metaphorical statement. He is making a statement about his own divinity. But I don't want to focus just on what Jesus says he is. I want to focus on why he says he is. I said earlier that, for every problem you have, Jesus is the solution. And so, why is it that Jesus is saying he is what he is? So the first week we said, Jesus is the bread of life because we are starving for eternity. Last week, he is the light of the world because we are walking in darkness. And today we're going to find out that Jesus is the gate because we're sheep who need a stronghold for safety and a field for fullness. Jesus is the gate because we are sheep who need a stronghold for safety and a field for fullness. Another way of saying that is Jesus is the gate because we need protection. Jesus is the gate because we need provision. Jesus is the gate because we need a way in for safety and a way out for abundance. So I've mentioned so far in this series, the Gospel of John was written in the city of Ephesus, but it was written about Jesus and his life centering around Jerusalem. It was written probably about 50 years after Jesus' death and resurrection. So today we're mostly going to be in John chapter 10, but it starts in John chapter 9. Jesus has just healed a blind man, and rather than being happy for the blind man or excited about this miracle, the Pharisees are upset that he was healed on the Sabbath. I mean, can you imagine if someone were here today blind and somehow they got healed and people being really upset about it? I don't know about you, I would be over the moon. I would be so excited. I'd be like, we got to tell people about this. This is an amazing miracle that has happened. But they're not like that. They get upset because he was healed on the Sabbath. For them, the rule of keeping the Sabbath and not working on the Sabbath was more important than a blind man being able to see. Which tells you pretty much everything you need to know about the Pharisees. So the blind man tries to explain that obviously Jesus must come from God, but the Pharisees won't hear it. And so Jesus speaks again to the blind man, explaining that he is the Messiah. This is all sort of the end of chapter 9. And then Jesus told him, I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and to show those who think they see that they are blind. And some Pharisees were standing nearby. They heard him and they asked, are you saying we're blind? I mean, throughout the book of John, we're seeing this constant battle going on between Jesus and the religious leaders. And Jesus is trying to help them see, you're actually blind. And they just, every time they get an opportunity to, they start to fight with them. They're saying, are you saying we're blind? If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty, Jesus replied, but you remain guilty because you claim you can see. So Jesus is using sort of a metaphorical thing here, like if you actually couldn't see what was going on here, then I wouldn't hold you accountable, but you've seen a miracle today, and you're focusing on the wrong thing. Then we get to chapter 10. But he's still continuing this part of it. He says, I tell you the truth, anyone who sneaks over the wall of a sheepfold rather than going through the gate. And I'll continue this in a second here, but you can tell that he's talking about the Pharisees. Okay, so contextually, he's in this discussion with the Pharisees about a miracle that's happened. He's calling them blind. He said, are we blind? If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty. But I tell you the truth, anyone who sneaks over the wall of a sheepfold rather than going through the gate must surely be a thief and a robber. So he is now passing judgment on the Pharisees, calling them thieves and robbers. And I thought to myself, what is the difference here? And I looked up, because to me, thief and robber sounds like pretty much the same thing. But when you actually think about it, a thief is somebody who kind of sneaks in without you knowing and takes something. A robber is a little bit more violent. It's somebody who's physically taking something from you, and you know that they're doing it. But for Jesus, they're pretty much one and the same. Anyone who sneaks over the wall to a sheepfold, he's using this metaphor of a sheepfold, anyone who sneaks over is a thief and a robber. And he's talking with the Pharisees, and he's saying, you guys are sneaking over the wall here. I'll explain what that means as we go here. But the one who enters through the gate, is the shepherd of the sheep. And this is kind of matter of fact. It's kind of clear, right? Like if you've got this sheepfold, someone sneaks over the wall. I mean, just the word sneak itself tells you they're up to no good. But if someone comes through the door, you know that they're there for a reason, that they are the shepherd of the sheep. They have a right to be there. If you sneak over the wall, it's a good indication you don't have a right to be there. But if you come through the door, you have a right to be there. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep recognize his voice and come to him. So this is talking about something that would happen in the ancient world where there'd be pens for the sheep. And there'd be a number of different flocks that would be held in this one pen. And so there'd be somebody who'd be in charge of the pen, and when the shepherd comes in, he would call to his sheep, and his sheep would actually follow him. I've seen videos of this. It's pretty amazing. I can call my cat, but he doesn't really come unless he hears me opening a can of food. But the sheep, they hear the voice of the shepherd, and they come running. They recognize. And what's more than that, he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. It's like they've got this close relationship. It's not enough to just say, yeah, these are my sheep. That's whatever name you want to give them. But he knows the sheep by name. He calls them out. After he's gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger. They will run from him because they don't know his voice. So we're going to use some contextual clues here that Jesus is talking about himself. That he is the one who comes, we're going to find out he actually is the gate, but he's the shepherd who loves his sheep, and his sheep know him and they follow him. And anyone who sneaks over the wall is not really the shepherd. And so Jesus is the shepherd of the sheep. The Pharisees aren't. And it's all pretty obvious, isn't it? Like Jesus is sort of explaining the rules of something that they probably are all aware of. And so they're kind of maybe thinking, okay, so what's the lesson here? Those who heard Jesus use this illustration didn't understand what he meant. And I can understand that a little bit. Like if you just hear this for the first time, you're thinking, okay, and what? Like what's the next part of it? There needs to be more to it. So he explained it to them. I tell you the truth. I am the gate of the sheep. Some translations use door, but I think gate actually works better. Because door, you think more of a house. Gate, you think of something like the gate to your backyard or a gate to a sheepfold or something like that. What's really interesting is that we find out that sometimes these sheepfolds or pens would be out in the wilderness, and it would just be a pile of rocks built in a big circle with one little opening. No door. And so the shepherd would gather his flock, and he'd get them in for the night, and then he would lay down in front of the opening. And he would be the doorway. He would be the one that would protect his sheep, keep them from going out when they shouldn't, keep anything that shouldn't come in. So if a wolf comes along, the shepherd is the one who's standing between the sheep and the wolf. He actually becomes the doorway. He becomes the gate. And so Jesus explains to them, here's all these rules that you already know about, but rather than actually like a swinging door, I am the one who's going to stand in the gap. I'm going to be the one who protects you from the wolves. And he goes on, he says, all who came before me were thieves and robbers, but the true sheep did not listen to them. And I was thinking about this. He's saying, all who came before me. So does that mean like the prophets, like King David, was he a sheep? No. I mean, any commentary will tell you that that's not the case. Anyone who came before Jesus without coming in Jesus' name, or without recognizing God as the Father, or Jesus as the Messiah, or this idea that the Messiah would come, those are the thieves and the robbers. And specifically right now, he's talking about the Pharisees. For today, anyone who tries to shepherd while diminishing Jesus is a thief and a robber. If you're not sure about something, if you ever go to a church and you're just like, I don't know about this, is this a good church or not? Ask yourself, what do they do with Jesus? Because they will always, if they're not a good Bible-believing Christian church, they will always diminish Jesus. Anyone who tries to shepherd while diminishing Jesus is a thief and a robber. So if you look at Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons, other religions, they will always minimize Jesus. They will say he was created, that he's just, one of many gods, that you can become just like him. He was a lesser god. He was simply a prophet. You know, a lot of times they'll build him up and say he's really awesome, but he's not at the same level that the Bible tells us that he is. They will always diminish Jesus. Prosperity gospel will say that Jesus is a means to earthly riches. But everyone who treats Jesus as anything less than the almighty sovereign Savior of the world is a thief and a robber. Jesus says, yes, I am the gate or door. Those who come in through me will be saved. So think about this as, you know, again, there's the rocks, the sheep pen. As soon as you go in there, you are safe when the shepherd is laying in front of the door. Wolves cannot get in. Wild animals cannot get in. You're saved. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I mean, we've seen this verse again and again in this series, but it's important for us to understand that Jesus is saying he is salvation. He's gate. He's the gate. So that when you go through him, you are safe. But it's only one part of the gate. You know, the gate opens up and it lets people in, and then it stands in the gap and it keeps people safe. But is that our entire life? Are we just Christians called to come into a place and just be safe all the time? Truth is, the gate opens up the other way as well. It says they will come and they go freely and will find good pastures. So when you are walking through the gate of Jesus, he's sending you out into good pastures. He wants you to live your life to the fullest, not just trapped up inside this pen all the time. Yes, you're safe in there, but you're not really living your best life in there. So he wants you to be safe when you need it, but he also wants you to go out and live your life as he wants you to. They will come and go freely and will find good pastures. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. And so that's what he wants for us. You know, there's times when we need protection and safety, and we need to be inside with the gate barring the way for anything to get at us. There's also times when the gate opens and we're supposed to go out and find good pastures and live our life to the fullest. And that's exactly what Jesus wants to give us. Not to steal and kill and destroy, but to give us a rich and satisfying life. So Jesus is the solution to our problems. Jesus is the gate because we're sheep who need a stronghold for safety. There's times when we need to be safe, but also a field for fullness. We need to go out and live our lives and experience everything that God has for us. God does not want you to be trapped. There are walls that he's put up to protect us from the dangers of the world. The rules he gives us aren't meant to imprison us, but to set us free. They're guardrails that keep us from going off the path he has for us. Like God has a plan and a design for our lives, and I think there's a wide range of things we could do within that. But there are times when he puts a wall up, and he says, don't go beyond that, because if you go off the road, you're going to get crushed. I want to protect you from that. God wants you to live a full life, but that doesn't mean going out and doing whatever you want. He has good pastures for us to explore, and there's so much freedom in those good pastures. So you need to ask yourself, what are the guardrails that I'm running up against? Why has Jesus put those rules in place? What is he protecting me from? And when I go in search of good pastures, am I traveling through the gate of Jesus? Or am I going my own way and living for myself? The key to a full life is to come and go through the gate of Jesus. We don't live our lives doing whatever we want, because we'll get ourselves into trouble. We live our lives doing what he wants because he wants the best for us. He knows what's best for us, and that's what he wants for us. When we surrender our will to God's will in our lives, we will find that we are living the best life that he can give us. I'll invite our worship team to come back up.